Right, children, it's time for your story. And again, this is a story that is built on a story that Jesus told. We're going to have Pat reading the Bible to us in a minute, and you'll hear Pat tell this story that Jesus told. Pat will tell it as Jesus told it in just a few sentences, and so I'm going to flesh it out a little bit and give it some pictures as well, try and bring it a little bit to life. So, it's a story about a strong man, and that strong man was called Stan. Stan was strong. I think if I'm looking around, I think if we put him in this room, he'd be the strongest man in the room. That's no offense to Victor, no offense to Phil or Andy or anyone else I haven't named. He'd be out muscling all of us. He'd be doing more press-ups, more bench press, more deadlift. Stan was a strong man. Worked hard in the gym, and one of the reasons he wanted to work hard in the gym was to keep himself safe. That's a key word in this. Safe. He wanted to keep himself and all that he owned safe, and so he kept himself fit. If anyone was going to come into his house, he wanted to know that he had the power and the strength to fight them off, to protect his house and to keep it all safe. So he goes to the gym, he keeps himself in good nick, he's ready for the fight if it ever dares come. Stan has also got a nice house, like a palace, a big house. So it's important he goes to the gym, it's important he's able to keep that house safe. But Stan wants to make it extra safe. If any of you've got a whiteboard, see if you can jot down on that whiteboard any ideas that you might have of keeping that house safe. If you had a really big house and you thought someone might come in, someone might be an intruder, someone might break in, how would you keep that house safe? To encourage anybody writing on a whiteboard, the bigger the writing, the better, my eyesight. Security cameras, that's a good idea. Security. Elephants, well, I think security cameras just got trumped. Yeah, elephants is a good answer. If you want to keep people away, have some elephants. Alarm and camera? Yeah, good. So security alarm, so you can keep your eye on intruders coming in. An alarm that would make some noise if they did come in. Some elephants for backup. Hopefully if they heard the elephants, a snake. Okay, we're on a train of thought now. Some dangerous animals, perhaps, to keep your property safe. Any answers I've missed out? 5, 4. An alarm, good. An intruder alarm to keep your things safe. Well, Stan had some extra ideas, and that was weaponry and armor. We've got a picture. There you go. At the top, he had some body armor to wear that if it did come to a scrap, he'd be able to take some blows, take some hits. He'd have some armor on. He'd be strong. And also some weaponry. Yeah, I don't know what country Stan's living in, but he's allowed some weapons to be able to fight off any intruders. As Stan goes to sleep, do you think he feels safe? He's big. He's strong. He's in a big house. He's got his elephants. He's got his alarms. He's got his body armor. And he's got his weapons. He wants to keep his goods, his possessions, safe. And I think if you popped into Stan's house, you might think, no one is going to get Stan's stuff. No one can come close to Stan. No one's ever going to take his belongings. No one would dare steal from him. But one day someone does dare to steal from him, and his name was Joshua. Joshua was bigger. Joshua was stronger. And he burst into the house. I think the elephants must have been asleep. Dun, dun, dun. Indeed, he was huge. So much bigger, so much stronger, spending so much more time in the gym. And he just got past the elephants. The snakes weren't too much worry. He just sort of whispered to the snakes and they sort of died down. The alarms went off, but as soon as everybody looked at the security camera, there was just a shadow, the sheer size of this man. Who was breaking into our house? He bursts through the security doors, bursts into the house, gets hold of Stan, rattles him, roughs him up a little bit, dominates him. The armor and the weapons are thrown out of the front window and they're thrown into the pool and destroyed. This house that looked so safe and looked so strong has been invaded. Someone has invaded this home, attacked this home, and he's had the victory. How has he had the victory? Because he's bigger and because he's stronger. And Joshua shared all of the goods, all of the belongings, all of the possessions of Stan with all of his friends. Now here's a question for you that I'm going to try and answer in the sermon, but I want your answers now. Who do you feel sorry for? Whose side are you on? Stan's or Joshua's? It'd be helpful if I had it on a board. It might indicate where... Okay, one Stan. Go on, Jeremiah. That looks like an S, a T, an A, and an N. Stans. Okay, two of you with Stan. Okay, so hold that story in your mind. Hold it as we listen. Stan. Everyone is on Stan's side. Okay, so hold that story in your hand. Don't hold it in your hand. Hold it in your head. And listen to the reading as it comes through and see if you can hear that story. It's not all going to be that story. That Jesus is going to be saying different things, but that story is built in. And then as we come to the sermon later on, try and think about your answer. Try and think about why Jesus is telling a story like this.
Luke chapter 11, verses 14 to 23. Now Jesus was casting out a demon that was mute. When the demon had gone out, the mute man spoke, and the people marvelled. But some of them said, He casts out demons by Beelzebul, the prince of demons, while others, to test him, kept seeking from him a sign from heaven. But he, knowing their thoughts, said to them, Every kingdom divided against itself is laid waste, and a divided household falls. And if Satan also is divided against himself, how will his kingdom stand? For you say that I cast out demons by Beelzebul. And if I cast out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore they will be your judges. But if it is by the finger of God that I cast out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. When a strong man fully armed guards his own palace, his goods are safe. But when one stronger than he attacks him and overcomes him, he takes away his armour in which he trusted, and divides his spoil. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters.
If you can have Luke chapter 11 in front of you, that would be helpful. It's that section that we had read that we're going to spend some time looking at from verse 13 onwards to verse 14, sorry. As we begin, I just want to have two questions. I want to give you two questions. I want these questions, in a sense, to stay in your mind. And I'm going to remind you of them at the end and see what you think of the questions. The answer to the first one is going to hopefully come in the sermon. The answer to the second one will come in your heart or in your head. And so it's one for you to take home, one for you to think about, one for you to answer yourself before God. First question then, how can all the evil in this world be dealt with? How can all the evil in this world be dealt with? We have an answer to that question in our passage today. A second question then, as evil is dealt with, as we learn and think about how God is going to deal with evil, where will I be found? Often we think we'll be on the good side, we'll be against the baddie. As we look to how God is going to deal with evil in this world, the question that comes back to us is whose side am I on? Where am I? Am I on the right side? And that's the question that you need to take home with you. That's the question that Luke wants you to ask as he records this account. So last week we returned to our studies in this book, and I just really, as we begin to think about this passage, want to unsettle you. I want to unsettle you. I want to talk a little bit about home invasions. It's not a pleasant thought, is it? Home invasions. Lots of the children were feeling sorry for Stan. He was attacked. His house was invaded. Someone broke into his property. Someone came in, assaulted him, and took his goods from him. And perhaps some of us live in fear of a home invasion in our own home. We don't like the thought of someone being in our house, either when we're there or when we're not there. Perhaps security cameras and alarms are things that we've got in our house. I imagine there's no one with body armor and guns or elephants or snakes, but we might have some precautions in our homes that have meant that our homes are more safe and less likely to have an invasion. I can remember when I was a child, I can't quite remember how old, I think about 13 and 14, we'd started to notice that some things had gone missing around the house. And after us kids had sort of been interviewed and proven to be innocent, the investigation went up a level and we eventually called the police. What was strange is that there were certain moments that we could tell when these things were there and when these things weren't. And that was inside daytime. Not only was it inside daytime, it was around the time we were all in the home. There's quite a lot of us. So someone had come in, taken something, and gone out without us noticing. Called the police, and the police came in, and the policeman told us there'd been a rise in what he called creepers. People who are local opportunists, who just try a door handle here and there, and just walk into homes quite brazenly, not too worried if there's, well, I guess a little bit worried if someone's in there, but walk around and take what they can. It led me in preparation for this sermon to look up some statistics. Here's one to unsettle you. Most burglaries in the UK are opportunist daytime activities between the hours of 10 and 3 p.m. Apparently lots of criminals recently during the sort of COVID pandemic have been struggling, trying to get more inventive because people have been in their homes so much longer. It's an unpleasant thought, isn't it? Whether you're in bed and you hear the creak of the door, you hear a smash of a window, you hear the dog bark. Who's that? Who's coming? Who's going to be brave enough to go downstairs and check? A threat, a risk to your safety, to the possessions in your own home. A home intruder feels like a violation. Someone trespassing, going to a place that they shouldn't be. Here's the shock. Here's the shock, particularly for those of you who wrote Stan on the board. Jesus, in this story, casts himself as the home invader. He's the one on the attack. He's the stronger one. He's the one who breaks in and subdues the homeowner and shares the spoil with his friends. I wonder if you can think of an occasion when you might welcome a home invasion. Can you imagine a setting, something going on in your life where you'd welcome someone to break into your home and beat up whoever was in charge? Well, perhaps, if you can imagine, you were held in captivity. That you were held in that home, in that house, against your will. You didn't want to be there. The locks and the elephants and the snakes and the security cameras that keep everyone else safe are keeping you in, locking you up. Then an invasion might feel more like liberation rather than violence. It feels a bit more like a dream rather than dread. Our text for this morning is found in verse 23. Whoever is not with me is against me. Whoever is not with me is against me. And we're going to see that this picture of a home invasion is helpful for understanding what Jesus is saying in those verses. To understand what Jesus is saying, we're going to answer three questions. The first one is, what are the two ways to be against Jesus? Jesus, in this passage, Luke outlines two ways that you can be against Jesus, and we're going to look at them both. And then secondly, we're going to answer the question, what does Jesus say to those people who are against him? I wonder what you say to your enemies. I wonder what you say to people who are against you. Do you try and defend yourself, or do you attack them? What does Jesus have to say to people who are against him? And then thirdly, what does Jesus have to say to those who are for him? Whoever is not with me is against me. But there are people who are with Jesus. And what does Jesus say to those who are with him? So that's the route. That's where we're going. And again, try and keep that story of Stan and Joshua in your mind. Okay, firstly then, 2 ways to be against Jesus. 2 ways to be against Jesus. Verse 14, now he was casting out a demon that was mute. When the demon had gone out, the mute man spoke, and the people marveled. That's it for the miracle. Did you notice that in the reading, that the miracle is sort of skimmed over? Elsewhere in Luke, we might have known the individual's name, or what his parents did for a living, or where they lived, or what this impact of this condition had on him, how it curtailed his life. We're not told any of those details. Luke seems to have changed tack a little bit. Before, he was demonstrating Christ's power to save, and his humanity, his kindness, his compassion to all sorts of different people. So it was in Luke's interest to give us more detail about the people. But now it's one verse. We have the need, we have the miracle, which is the solution, and then we have the result. The man spoke. It works. The demon is cast out, Christ's power, and he spoke. What Luke wants us to think about now is the reaction, the response. The rest of the passage is all about what happens next, how people respond to him. Verse 15, he is with the devil. That's what the people are saying. Some of them say he casts out demons by Beelzebul, the prince of demons. These people are saying, they've decided in their own mind that if they witness Jesus' power, his miracles, they're saying he's evil. Can you imagine? Looking at Jesus, witnessing Jesus, and coming to the conclusion that Jesus is evil. I wonder if anyone in this room or anyone streaming would dare to say that. Jesus is an evil man. Well, that's what these people were saying. They're using the name Beelzebul, which is perhaps not a name that we'd use an awful lot. One of the understandings of that name is master of the house. Master of the house. There are a couple of different ones, but it would seem that translation, that understanding, fits in really with how Jesus responds. Master of the house. And so what are they saying about Jesus? If they're saying Jesus is with Beelzebul, what are they saying? They're picturing Satan as the master of the house. Satan as the boss of the house of all that's evil and all that is dark. And they're saying that demons are his servants. If Satan is the master of the house, then demons do as they're told. Satan says, go there, they go there. Satan says, do that, and they do that. So as they see Jesus casting out demons and telling a demon, get out of there, go over there, the way that they're thinking is, Jesus must somehow be in this house. He must be somewhere in this house of Satan. He can't be just like the demons, like the servants, because he's more powerful than them. He must be somewhere underneath Beelzebul. He must be somewhere underneath the master. And the master has given him power, and that power is now sending these demons out. You wonder if darker thoughts have ever gone through people's minds. It's a reflection of how bad the human heart can get. That such wicked thoughts, with such dark logic, goes on in someone's mind. Like someone can refer to Jesus as a servant of the devil. So that's the first way to be against Jesus. Jesus is evil. But there's a second response in verse 16. While others, to test him, kept seeking from him a sign from heaven. I see, these individuals are a bit more on the fence. And I imagine there perhaps aren't many in this room who think Jesus is evil, but I reckon there could be a good few who are sitting on the fence. Or just more of a sign. If I was with Jesus and I saw him cast out demons, then I believe. If I was there and saw his resurrection body with the nail marks in his hands, then I believe. If I saw him walking on water, then I'd believe. And these people were seeing all of that. They were witnesses to all of that, and they were saying, just a little bit more, just another sign. These people, despite being eyewitnesses, are still unconvinced. This seems a much more reasonable position, doesn't it? I reckon there are some people in this room, perhaps some people streaming, who are unconvinced about Jesus. What is shocking is that Jesus puts these two groups together. The group that is unconvinced and the group that says Jesus is evil, he's with the devil. Jesus puts them two together. And he says, whoever is not with me is against me. Whether you're shaking your fist at me and you hate me, or whether you shrug your shoulders, you're against me. One group is saying, I'm against you, Jesus. What you stand for is evil. The other group is saying, I'm not against you. I just need another sign. And Jesus' response is, whoever is not with me is against me. The question then we need to ask ourselves is, where are we on Jesus? How do we decide? Who is he to us? And it's an all or nothing issue. There isn't a fence to sit on. There isn't that I grew up in a Christian home and I think he's all right. But he isn't king of my life. And he isn't determining my future. And I'm not listening to him much. Who do you say that he is? Second question. What does Jesus have to say to those who are against him? What does Jesus have to say to those two crowds, to those two groups? What does he have to say? Here we'll see Jesus brilliantly dismantle this accusation that he is evil, that he's working with the devil. We'll probably see in more detail later on when we come to a later passage in Luke. If you've got the Bible open, if you look down at verse 29, Jesus goes on to talk to people who are demanding more signs. So the focus on signs and those who want more signs will come a bit later. Particularly this passage focuses on those who are calling him the devil. But Jesus does bring both groups together in that whoever is against me, whoever is not for me is against me. So there are four levels to this case. Jesus is like a lawyer in court, and he's dismantling the case. And by the end, he's not just dismantling, he goes on the attack. So here are four steps to Jesus' answer. Firstly, Jesus tells them that a divided house falls. Jesus shows remarkable composure. These people are attacking him. They're saying evil things about him. Imagine if someone came up to you and said, you're like the devil. You're with Satan. How would you respond? What would you say in response? Well, Jesus builds his case, and he begins really cleverly with common ground. He says to them, a kingdom divided against itself is laid to waste. A divided household falls. Jesus doesn't say anything about Satan. He doesn't say anything about himself. He just gives this general truth that everyone can agree with. It's common sense. No one can disagree. It's like saying civil war isn't very good for a country. Or a husband and a wife fighting all day, every day, isn't very good for a house or for a family. Well, everyone knows it. It's obvious. Everybody can get on board with that. So these people who are against him are now, yeah, I agree. A house divided cannot stand. A kingdom fighting against itself is going to be laid to ruin. And particularly Jesus is talking to Jewish people, isn't he? So perhaps this picture is also looking back to Israel's history, to a united kingdom under David and a divided kingdom later on. That the divisions in that family, the divisions in the kingdom, destroyed the nation. So they know from their own history, they know from their own culture that what Jesus is saying is true. There's no argument against it. Jesus moves on. Second point. Would Satan divide his own house? Now Jesus comes back. Now he's got them all on board. He comes back to the key characters. The key characters are himself. He's with the devil, and the devil. And so he brings these two characters in. Verse 18. And if Satan also is divided against himself, how will his kingdom stand? Remember, they've used this name Beelzebul, master of the house. Jesus is asking, would Satan really empower me? Would he really employ me to tear his house to shreds? Because that's what you're watching. You're watching me humiliate him, demolish him, dominate him. Is Satan so stupid that he would shoot himself in the foot? Jesus has already, on level 2 of his argument, destroyed their argument. He's destroyed their case. He is clearly at work destroying evil, subduing it, releasing people from its grip. Jesus is saying, I'm in the house. I'm not with Satan. I'm smashing it up. I've invaded it. I've attacked it. I'm Joshua, who is stronger than he, and I've broken in and subdued him, and I'm sharing out the spoil. I'm causing havoc for the kingdom of darkness. Satan is running from the hills from me. I do this as the King of light. And so we need to stop here in Jesus' argument, because he has just demolished the argument. And we need to ask ourselves some questions. Each of us must evaluate, who do we say Jesus is? It's an all or nothing question. Either Jesus is the Son of God who brings salvation to his people just like you and me, or he's not. Which is it? Well, he might be that he's a wise man, a good man. We learn about in school all sorts of different wise men and good men, all sorts of religious leaders, and I think Jesus is one of those. But I'm afraid Jesus' teachings, his own words, don't leave room for that. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. Jesus is saying, I am the only way. And so you can't put him in this list of all these other religious leaders, because Jesus doesn't make space for himself on that shelf. He says, I don't belong on this shelf. So you either need to push him off because he's too arrogant, he doesn't belong there with these other regarded leaders, or you put him on his own shelf. Perhaps you think he was a good man. I'd never say, like these people were saying, that he was evil. He was a fine moral teacher. I'm afraid Jesus' own words don't allow you to have that position. Jesus said, John 14, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. He's not claiming to be a good man. He's claiming to be God on earth. You haven't got much left, I'm afraid. I don't know what thoughts are left in your mind if you're undecided. There is one other place to go. He's a madman. I don't have to listen to him because if he's saying those things, of course they're not true. Of course he's not God on earth, so he's mad. He's misguided, he's confused, he's ill. But then you need to go and read some of his teachings. You need to read some of his parables. You need to read the Sermon on the Mount. You need to see his ability to confound those that are around him. People are trying to trap him at every corner, and he's able to cut through all of their thinking. His teachings, his words, they're not the ramblings of a madman. And so Jesus is precisely who he claims to be. He is the incarnate Son of God. He is God on earth. He's Emmanuel, God with us. He is the Redeemer. He's the one God has sent to rescue men and women to himself. He's the Messiah. He's the anointed one that God has sent into this world. And as such, he deserves your complete allegiance. Anything short of complete allegiance is enmity. You're against him. Jesus isn't finished. He's only laid 2 blocks. Imagine being one of those people who was thinking like this. Remember, Jesus is reading their minds. They're thinking like this, and here's his response, and he's got more to say. He then says, what about your sons? What about your sons? Verse 19, and if I cast out demons by Beelzebul, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore they will be your judges. Jesus accepts for a moment their proposition. Oh, I'm evil. Okay, if I'm evil, then who are they casting demons out? If he's working with the devil, what does that say about the others who cast out demons? Are these enemies suggesting that everybody who does this is evil? Can you see how black the human heart is? How desperate to squirm out of the pressure that the Bible, that Jesus' words puts them under. They're so desperate to reject Christ and their claims that they'll think all sorts of wild and wonderful thoughts. Who are they? Who are the sons? That's tricky. It's not too sure. Some think it's other Jewish exorcists. There's a good case for that. There are other people perhaps more affiliated to those enemies of Christ, to the Pharisees and the scribes. Bad guy for doing this good. What about them who are doing the very same thing? It's a powerful argument, isn't it? But it may be that Jesus is talking about his own disciples. Recently in Luke's gospel, Jesus sent out his disciples, then sent out his 72 disciples to do what he's been doing. And so the sons might be a broader sons of Israel, his own people, that he's empowered, that he's enabled to do this work. And I think that fits Luke's telling a little better, because he talks about sharing the spoil, sharing the power, sharing the benefits. Either way, the tables are being shifted. There are others who are going to sit in judgment over them. Can you see? In their minds, they were judging Jesus. You're evil. We need more signs. We need more from you. You need to prove yourself to us. And Jesus is saying, you don't get it. Others will rise up and judge you. You will find yourselves under judgment. And then the last bit, the great if. But if it is the finger of God, verse 20, that I cast out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. Jesus concludes his argument with this great if. We've looked at supposing your argument is true, and it clearly isn't because it falls to ruin. But if I'm true, if I'm the right one, if this activity of me testifies to me being good, then the finger of God, God's presence and God's power is at work among you, and you dare to speak against it. He says, if I'm right, you are clearly on the wrong side. You're fighting against the fight against evil. You're fighting against goodness. Jesus demolished their argument as sheer nonsense, a desperate attempt to avoid the truth. And we do that, don't we? We squirm away from inconvenient truth. We do that. If we're caught in the wrong, we'll argue and fight. Children, do you do that? You've done something that you know is wrong, but perhaps you weren't spotted. Perhaps the evidence isn't conclusive against you, and so you squirm. You say, well, this happened because of that, and someone else pushed that over, and I didn't eat that bit of chocolate cake, although there's chocolate all over your mouth. We squirm away. We try and find excuses. Jesus replaces their nonsense with truth. His account makes much better sense of the evidence. This work testifies to my identity, testifies to who I am. And then Jesus uses this parable, the parable that we opened up with the children, to make clear what he has done. You call him Beelzebul, the master of the house. He is strong. Just like Stan, he's armed. He's got his body armor and he's got his weaponry. He's ready for all attacks. He's got all sorts of power. Jesus admits the strength of the devil, a formidable opponent to us. Just like Stan was a formidable opponent to any normal burglar. He was too big, too strong, too well prepared. And Satan is a great enemy to us. And Jesus is saying, I'm no friend of Satan. I'm no servant of Satan. I'm the home invader. I attacked him. I've broken him. I've overpowered him. I've disarmed him, and now I share the spoil with my friends. Can you notice how the strong man and the invader match up? Satan, verse 21, is the strong man. Jesus, verse 22, is the one who is stronger. Satan is fully armed. Jesus, in verse 22, takes away his armor. He removes it. The thing that was protecting him, the thing that was arming him and helping him is removed. In verse 21, the strong man sits comfortable and safe. His goods are safe and protected. In verse 22, the spoils are divided. His goods, his possessions are divided. This is no closely fought contest. This isn't Joshua versus Fury. This is a different league altogether. Jesus attacked him and dominated him. He's humbled him and routed him. In rugby, we talk about dominant tackles. Tackles that drive the attacking team past the gain line. You don't just stop someone, you drive them back into their own territory. You make ground that way. And Jesus is knocking Satan off the pitch. He's humbled him. The kingdom of darkness is being smashed by the Lord Jesus. It's not an even fight. And this is the home invasion we all need. We all need it. Because Satan has a grip on all of us. He's able to dominate us because he is mightier, because he is stronger. Now, that doesn't mean we're all demon-possessed. That's what we have here, a story of demon possession and then liberation. The Bible talks about a range of ways in which Satan's grip is displayed on humanity. The grip is total, across the board, every man, woman, boy and girl. But the depth is varied. And someone who's demon-possessed is completely empowered, possessed even by darkness. But all of us are held in Satan's grip. As we look at this story, you need to ask, do I dare live without such liberation? Do I dare stand against this sort of power? Jesus is saying, whoever is not with me is against me. And so Jesus is saying to you today, if you're not with me, if you're not proactively for me, if I'm not king of your life, then you might as well be saying, you're evil. You stand against him. You stand against the one whom God has sent. Finally, our third question, what does Jesus say to those who are with him? Jesus' focus in this passage is all about those who are opposed to him, but there are things that we can learn if we are for Jesus. If he has liberated us and we're for him. Firstly, it's that we're liberated. Those that belong to Jesus have been liberated from him, by him. Satan doesn't have his grip on us anymore. We can still feel the power of his voice. We can still sometimes fear him. He has no ownership of us anymore. We're released from his grip. We can resist him. Secondly, whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. Jesus is saying, if you're with me, then you gather. That's what you do. From a burglary, from a home invasion, to gardening, to harvesting, to farming, gathering the crop, bringing in. This liberation that Jesus offers means that there are men and women out there who need liberating, who need bringing in, who need harvesting, being brought into the kingdom of God. And Jesus is recruiting us, he is liberated, into the mission. Come and join me. Are you pointing people to Jesus? If you are, then you're gathering. Are you telling people about Jesus? If you are, then you're gathering. Are you praying that men and women that you know will come to know Jesus? It was a real privilege to be in one of your homes this week and hear of one of you sharing Bibles with your work colleagues. You're alongside Jesus gathering. You wanted to communicate about the liberator. You wanted to point people to him. Well, thirdly, you share the spoil. It's a funny picture, isn't it? It's a strange picture. We're in this picture alongside Jesus as burglars, as home invaders. And Jesus is sharing the goods with us. Feels a bit naughty to be encouraging that in church. But the house we're invading is the devil's house. We're destroying his kingdom, and we're sharing the spoil that he's held in his grip. He thought he had people safe, and Jesus disarmed him. And so the spoil is men and women who are set free. And so as you gather, as you share the good news, you're part and parcel of this victory march. You have the joy, the privilege of seeing men and women come to life, to see them freed from the grip. Jesus is evidently the Son of God sent to save. The question is, what are you going to do with him? So the two questions with which we begin. How can evil in this world be dealt with? Our world has got so many answers, hasn't it? Some of those answers are good, partially, but they're never going to be complete. Whether that's marching on the street or signing petitions or fighting in wars or voting for particular politicians or investing money, those are our human efforts, aren't they? Many of them good human efforts, but human efforts to bring about the end of evil. And God is saying this is the only way that evil will be fundamentally dealt with. The evil one being overpowered by my Son. And then secondly, as evil is dealt with, where will I be found? And that's the question for you to take home with you. Amen.